There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on. Hello and welcome to Mamamia Out Loud. It's what women are actually talking about on Monday, the 26th of August, and I'm Holly Wainwright.
I'm Mia Freedman.
And I'm Jessie Stevens.
On the show today, how a 17-year-old boy and some downshifting alpha blokes started a conversation about good men on the world stage. Also, as of today, you are legally allowed to ignore your boss after hours. Or are you? That sound you can hear is me leaving all my group chats with Mia. And she's going to steal herself for that conversation.
Holly Wainwright's left the chat.
And the trick to solving all your clothes problems comes down apparently to a 3-word system. But first, Jessie Stevens.
In case you missed it, Ben Affleck has been pictured with another woman amid his separation from Jennifer Lopez, and that woman is Kik Kennedy, the daughter of Robert F. Kennedy. Just a note on the Kennedys, there's a lot of them. Can someone? I tried to Google, but Kik Kennedy was a sister and a niece and a nephew and a blah, blah, blah.
So
Is Kik
yes,
the niece of the JFK one?
Robert Kennedy Jr. His father was Robert Kennedy, who was the brother of JFK.
I've missed a generation here.
Yes.
See, there's a lot. And I just
he
know
was
they're
assassinated as well as JFK being assassinated.
But Kik's dad, as Mia says, is the one who was running for president until 5 minutes
It
ago.
was a very big weekend for that
the
part of the
Kennedys.
Kennedy family.
But back up. Ben has moved on so
Ben has
quickly,
moved
Jessie.
on. This is correct.
Is this scurrilous gossip?
It's too soon.
Yes, it is. Kik Kennedy is 36 years old. She's been pictured with 52-year-old Ben at the Polo Lounge at the Beverly Hills Hotel, as well as at other hotspots.
Hotspots?
Holly, discuss.
It's probably not true, but I'm here for it.
Oh, no, it's true.
Oh, it feels.
Do you think
it
it's
feels
true?
Yeah, because it's very random.
Because well, that's true. And often the more random the story, the more real it is. And again, Out Loud, as we know this is scurrilous gossip, but we also know you're invested in the benefit divorce. So we want to keep you up to date because you wouldn't want to miss anything.
Yeah,
would you?
exactly.
You wouldn't want to miss anything.
And by you, we mean
us,
me and Holly.
But also, it maybe explains the timing of the divorce filing because, as we discussed last week, they've been separated for a while. They've been working out whether or not to push the button, pull the trigger, whatever you want to call it. And maybe the fact that Ben is hanging around with someone new, it seems like a very good reason
Holly,
to push the trigger.
No, incorrect. You've got the timing wrong. What's happened is that J-Lo has filed for divorce, which we all said was a bit of a power move. She kind of played her cards when she filed for the separation. Now it was Ben's move. And this is Ben's move,
He's
right?
clapping back.
It was ball in his court and he went, I've got Kik, who is, even though I don't fully understand the family tree, an American institution. I'm hanging out with 36-year-old Kik.
Another American institution, Jennifer Lopez is an
Yes.
American institution. So you think divorce filing Wednesday,
Yeah.
Ben got out his little black book and went, who can I go on a high-profile date with to the Polo
100%.
Lounge tonight?
And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because of how relatable it is. Because I once broke up with someone. Well, I think he broke up with me, but anyway, that doesn't matter. And then I went on Instagram and he posted a picture of him with some woman. Where did she come from? At the end of a run, which was very passag because I can't run. So it was like a very, I went for a run with this beautiful woman who's got rosy cheeks from exerting herself. And when I saw that, I went, I know how J-Lo feels. Because I have also had to have a look at the new woman.
Had they gone for a run or had they just had sex?
Maybe they'd had sex, but they made it look like they were doing something very wholesome on a Saturday, and it made me feel bad. And I think that J-Lo is annoyed today.
Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you.
Last week in America was all about Kamala Harris. In the minds of delusional small L liberals like me everywhere, we have a new queen, and she wears a navy pantsuit with a pussy bow shirt.
It's a pussy bow shirt back.
Yes, I know this isn't important out
it's
loud.
not.
For her big speech on Friday,
It is important.
she wore a very understated but very classy, wouldn't you agree, Mia?
Very classy.
Chloe suit, which
Very
is
demure.
fancy
Yeah.
Very classy.
designer. Pantsuit, fitted, pussy bow shirt. Excellent.
Okay.
Anyway, It was the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, as we discussed briefly last week, and it dominated the global news cycle for a week, as it was designed to do. There were quite a few storylines. There were impassioned talks about abortion from survivors of sexual abuse, about gun violence from survivors of shootings. There were anti-war protesters outside. There was the much-admired speeches from Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Hillary Clinton, and, of course, Kamala Harris herself. But I want to talk about blokes, not about all those amazing women, because, of course, I do. Because whether or not you give a stuff about American politics, and I know quite a lot of you listening do not, there is something very interesting bubbling along here about masculinity and celebrations of a different kind of masculinity that was on big display last week. And it's in very stark opposition to Trump's very basic man strong, big strong man, face down scary of the strong men act, right? Obviously, there's the subtext here that every powerful man who took the stage over those 4 days was in support of a powerful woman. But also, those men showing a human, emotional and family side seemed to be very high on the priority scale of what they were there to do. There was Kamala's husband, Doug Emhoff, who was beautifully introduced by a very emotional video by his son. Now, Doug is a hyper-successful lawyer, entertainment lawyer in Los Angeles, who quit his regular job to support Kamala as VP and now to get her elected. And the talk he gave and the pride and the strength he shows at being the man behind the woman is a vibe. He will be, obviously, if she is elected, the first gentleman. And the last time a woman ran, obviously, her first gentleman had been the president. So this is an entirely new vibe that we're seeing.
He's currently the
in
second
America.
gentleman because she's the vice president.
And that's a job. Apparently, it is a job.
Not a paid one.
And then there was, of course, Tim Walz, who's Harris's nice guy running mate. And his excellent mind your own goddamn business speech, which is what he's very good at doing, is he's like, where I'm from in the Midwest, we stay out of each other's bedrooms. Like, he's really good at that stuff. But his speech was almost overshadowed by the attendance of his young son, Gus. Now, Gus was in the stands watching his dad speak, along with his mum, Gwen, and his sister, Hope. Gus Walz, according to his parents, has a non-verbal learning disorder in addition to an anxiety disorder and ADHD. In this case, a non-verbal disorder is not the same as non-speaking. It's a disorder that impacts the way that kids absorb and utilize information, but there are lots of interventions you can have, and it doesn't mean that Gus can't talk, and Gus drives and all of those things. Tim and Gwen have spoken about it several times, and they definitely refer to him as neurodivergent. And his very enthusiastic response to his dad led some people to mock him. Imagine being that awful. But anyway.
Are you serious? Because all I've seen is love for him. Like, he became quite iconic quite quickly. Because when I saw it, I saw this young man getting very emotional, tears in his eyes, getting up and saying, "That's my dad, that's my dad." And this is awful. But I thought at the time, oh no, that kid's going to cop it at school. And he's just been caught up in the moment. That's before I learned that he was neurodivergent and had some challenges in his life. And then it made more sense to me. But have some people been horrible to him?
So I'm going to play you a tiny bit of a TikTok for an example. So there's a famous conservative commentator called Ann Coulter. She has written books about Donald Trump and all the rest of it. And she immediately shared a shot of Gus Walz along with the line, "Talk about weird," which was obviously in response to the fact that Tim Walz has coined the term weird for the religious conservatives on the Republican side. Anyway, here's a little TikTok by somebody responding to that.
Y'all, I'm reporting on the very last day of the Democratic National Convention here in Chicago, Illinois, and I feel like the entire week I've been very demure, very mindful, very cutesy, but ever since I saw Ann Coulter say this about Tim Walz's son who is disabled, I'm going to say, fuck that shit, it's all out of the window.
And then she went on to drag Ann Coulter into the gutter and say, never mind, we go high, we're dragging everybody down into hell with us now. So it pissed a lot of people off. But equally, as you say, Mia, Gus kind of became iconic, and Tim Walz drew an enormous amount of praise, which is also weird when you think about it, for actively loving his family, which kind of shows you how low the bar is here.
Well, compare and contrast it with the other model of masculinity and family that we're seeing, which is the big difference between the Republican National Convention and the Democratic National Convention. It's so clear, like when you see the Trump family on stage, Like, Melania's got a contract. She won't even look at him, will barely touch his hand. Like, there's not a lot of love in that family. Donald Trump never speaks about his kids in any way except to say his daughter's got good tits and his youngest son's really tall.
Are you maligning what he said? I don't think he said that she had good
No,
tits.
I
I think he said he would not mind sleeping with her.
Oh, sorry. Just to
If
clarify.
they were not related.
I have also misrepresented Trump.
So
there,
I
but-
think it's interesting, these contrasting, because Tim Walz, he didn't expect to be vice president, right? He's not like, I've been waiting for this. He got the call from the bench pretty unexpectedly 2 weeks after he came out and had this amazing cut through by the weird comment. And so he's been visibly moved by the big crowds, by the reception, by the people chanting, coach, coach, coach. We've seen, I think, a degree of emotional intelligence, not just from Gus Walz, who I think has been emblematic of something, but this idea that men can not just get emotional, but also that they can respect women, that they can fight for the rights of women
and that
to
can
be able to have control over their own bodies. And that idea of contrasted with Donald Trump, which is this cruel, what I would call toxic masculinity, which is about mocking people, being cruel to people, being very sort of thrusting and aggressive. And then JD Vance, which is about oppressing women and being really malevolent and wanting to wind the clock back for women, that type of masculinity.
I've heard Tim Walz's masculinity described as tonic masculinity, as sort of the opposite to toxic. And what's so refreshing about it is that it is still a vision of masculinity. It's not effeminate. And this is what I think the Republicans have set it up, that it's like, we are losing what it is to be a man. Tim Walz is a man.
Yeah.
Do you know who introduced Tim Walz at the convention? A whole bunch of football players who he'd coached. And what's so interesting about his time as a football coach is that the kids at the school where he was working, some of the queer kids had been bullied and harassed. He enlisted all the young men on his football team to protect them and to stand between bullies and these guys. And I mean, that is a new model.
It's sort of the definition of inspiring. And the other thing that's refreshing is that all of us have Tim Walz's in our life. And it's been really difficult to describe this healthy masculinity that exists. And maybe Tim Walz will fix your car.
And Doug's.
And yeah, exactly right. They do see themselves as fathers and husbands and all of those things, but it doesn't rely on the oppression of women.
They're protective without being
Controlling.
Controlling.
Yeah.
They seem to, like all the people on all the very long list of impressive men who stood up and spoke at that none of them were threatened by the powerful females in their lives, or at least it seemed that way. But Jessie, I want to ask you, is the fact that everybody's so excited about the fact that Tim Walz appears to like his family just like a little bit table stakes? Don't most people like their families? And also, hasn't family values always belong to the right? So what we're seeing is it being reclaimed by the left. But also, it's kind of hilarious that people might be surprised by that.
The irony, I think, is that the Republican convention talked a lot about families, but at the Democratic convention, we saw a lot of families. And that's the difference. It's like show, don't tell. In all the yelling about abortion and contraception and all of that that's been done, and the JD Vance and the Trump of it all, I keep thinking, I think in that same Republican image of masculinity is the Elon Musks, who have 1,000 children that they don't spend any time with. And it's because they believe that the world needs more children or whatever.
More white children.
Yes,
like
exactly.
them.
But with Tim, to actually see a family that loved each other and to see that expression, I think the neurodivergent element of this is really important. And everyone has someone in their lives who is neurodivergent, everyone, that is not represented in the mainstream. With politics, with conventions, with elections, it is so contrived. It is so performative. So to see the word authentic is overused, but there was nothing preempted about that response. It was so pure that's why everyone leaned into it.
You know what I loved about it? I can't understand the attacks. Like, I just don't understand having a mind that closed that you would not think that a Gus Walz is not like a wonderful gift to have in your family. But also, it would have been a big decision for Gwen and Tim to have Gus at that event. Not that he has been in any way sheltered or hit, like Tim Walz has spoken about Gus before. He's very proud of his family. He's relatively public. But that is a level of attention that is hard for any of us to comprehend. And what I particularly liked about it is they would have known that Gus was going to react in an excited way, in the way that he did to an extent. No one was trying to like shush him, make him sit down, like be smaller, be quiet, be less. Like Hope and Gwen were barely looking at him. You know what I mean? They were looking at Tim on the stage, supporting him for his big moment. Like it was just a very natural family moment, but it would have taken some balls to do because nothing happens on that kind of stage without the nth degree of stage management. Do you know what I mean? And it was really, I just loved that was there.
I agree. And that was one element they couldn't control. And to watch that none of them were trying to suggest that he sit down. And it would have just been in a sense of protection for him. But I also think that we're used to a narrative, even though we think we've moved past it, that to have a child with any sort of disability or any sort of difference is a tragedy. That is something that we're fed, and that it makes your life harder, and that, I don't know, the love is different, but...
And that it's something to be hidden
and
or embarrassed
yes,
of.
But for him, the sentence that Tim Walz said before his son said, "That's my dad," is, "You are my entire world and I love you," about his family. There was no ifs, there was no buts, there was no reference to the fact that his son was neurodivergent. That was a representation you don't see very often, just unbridled pride.
I see it in your family. You know, it reminded me so much of the way your family are with your cousin Simon and your Aunt Michelle. This sounds so obvious, but by treating people without kid gloves and just being around them publicly and not making a big deal, you give them such dignity to just be themselves. What you said, Hull, is so true. They weren't trying to make him smaller. They weren't trying to make him conform. They weren't trying to make him be in a box of what you should be. And to me, this idea of freedom, which the Democratic Party is trying to harness, the word freedom, it's a very beautiful thing, and it's being shown in all these different ways. And back to family, I think that the other thing that was really notable is Kamala Harris is in a blended family. She has 2 stepkids who are adults, and they were there. And the other person who just looked incredibly moved and happy, who I couldn't take my eyes off in her speech, is her stepdaughter, Ella, who was in the glasses and was wearing that amazing ball gown. She's very cool. And she was next to her dad, and they all came on the stage afterwards. And I don't know if you saw many of the images from the Republican convention, but when you said at the beginning, Hull, I don't know why we're talking about what they're wearing, it is actually really important what politicians wear, because they do send messages, whether we like it or not. We live in a visual world. People do send messages with their clothes in the same way that royals do, right? Particularly people who might not speak freely. And if you looked at the aesthetics of the Republican convention, it was all women who looked like, I'm going to say fembots, highly surgeried, had this big hair, tight dresses, sky-high heels. And there's nothing wrong with that look, but when every woman on the stage looks the same, like a Fox News female newsreader, that makes me feel nervous. That has power in saying this is what we believe women should be and what women should look like. And this idea of our idea about women is that they are a threat, they need to be an ornament, and they need to be controlled by taking away their rights.
The best commentary I've been hearing about the US election has been from Ezra Klein. I recommend listening to Ezra Klein at the moment. He's just on fire. But he said that every election, if you look back, it's about one issue, and that this election is about gender. You look at abortion and that's obviously on the agenda. But for him, he was like, no, this is about masculinity and different ways in which it's manifesting. So he was saying that you've got the Tim Walz, and he actually dissected the differences in the masculinity between Trump and J.D. Vance.
In Donald Trump and in Tim Walz, you have 2 very different but very explicit archetypes, visions of what it means to be a man. Trump's pitch is built on, I would call it an almost cartoonish overperformance of masculinity, which is aimed at alienated young men. I mean, having Hulk Hogan and the head of the UFC on your night at the convention really puts a sharp point on that. But in Tim Walz, Democrats have found their own version of a male archetype, a football coach, a soldier, a guy who will fix your car. but also an ally, a man comfortable being in the role of supporting women, a man unthreatened by social change, a man even excited by it.
Because they're both responses to this underground rejection of feminism that the Andrew Tates, that the younger generations are going, feminism has threatened us.
It's a real clapback to or a pushback against the way Hillary Clinton ran and her idea of I'm with her, glass ceiling. I agree. I loved what Ezra Klein said.
I love it, but again, I'm just going to throw it in there. Low bar. Man has to think woman should be allowed to have a job and seem to be interested in his children and know their names. Come on, guys.
But that's what's been so crazy about the last 10 years for anyone who's been following American politics, and how can you not? Because you've got a man who says, I'm going to grab her by the pussy, and he is elected.
I agree. And I loved, Doug's speech made me so happy, and I love the confidence and joy that he carries with him in the role of being second gentleman and possibly the first gentleman. Apparently he has second gentleman on his mugs. He fully embraces it. And apparently he's right there with Kamala, making the calls, getting it. They are clearly a very tight unit, and I love to see it. But I'm also always just a little bit gosh, we really don't expect much from the chaps, do we?
Look, I agree. And looking at the Trump example, he had Hulk Hogan at the Republican convention. There's a representation. And you were talking about Ann Coulter, but there was another tweet by a guy named Mike Crispy, who is a reporter, TV host, MAGA person. And he said, Tim Walz's stupid crying son isn't the flex the left think it is. You raised your kid to be a puffy beta male. Congrats. Does Barron Trump cry? Nope. Does he love his father? Of course. That's the types of values I want leading the country. What's telling about that is the use of the word beta, because I think that the Republicans have thought that the only model of masculinity is alpha, and the Democrats are saying the opposite to that isn't beta. It's just this diverse representation.
The world isn't that simple, guys. No. And also Barron Trump probably barely knows who his dad is. Does he cry? Every night himself to sleep.
Mamamia out loud.
You are my entire world, and I love you.
As of today, there are new rules for work, and they affect anyone who has a boss or is a boss. From today, you will be legally able to clock off from work without having to be available after hours. It's called the right to disconnect law, and you may have seen people freaking out about it. Bosses complaining that they can't send an email at 5:15 p.m, or employees complaining that one time their boss rang them while they were giving birth to ask if they'd marked the exams for their class. So what's going on, really? I think we can all agree that's a bit unreasonable, unless, of course, the boss didn't know that she was giving birth at that time.
You messaged me a lot during my labour, but in your defence, you were emotionally invested.
Oh, I wanted to know what you thought of my fringe. From today, in businesses with more than 15 employees, workers will have the right to refuse contact outside their working hours, including calls and emails, unless that refusal is unreasonable. Now, Brent Ferguson, who is the head of an employer group called AI Group, explained that these new laws won't bring an end to late night calls. He said it's a new right for an employee to refuse that contact, to refuse to monitor their emails, or to refuse to take a telephone call from their employer if it's outside their working hours. So emails and calls, it's got to be reasonable, but you have got the right not to respond.
Right. Did you know that it also doesn't apply to you if you earn over $175,000 a year?
I did.
I found that in the fine print.
What's going to happen, though, is in August next year, this will apply to all businesses, including small businesses where there's less than 15 employees, unless the coalition win the election in May, because Peter Dutton has said they will repeal this law.
Why?
Because he says it's very bad for employers. Now, more than 20 countries have similar laws in place, and research has found that it improved well-being and work satisfaction in any companies with these right to disconnect policies. Holly, does it seem reasonable when I text you at 6 a.m. to tell you that J-Lo has filed for divorce? And will you be blocking me from the group chat?
You've just horrified me by telling me there's an election in May. I'm not ready for that.
No.
Anyway, back to your question. Is it unreasonable? No, it's not unreasonable. I think these laws are great. I do. I think that it's a correction, because basically what's happened over the past 10 years is there's been a creep, right? There's been a creep into all kinds of workplaces where it's not essential or urgent that you answer the boss's message in that very moment that they send it, but they can. And very often you feel pressure to. And when I say you, I don't mean me. I mean people in the world. So it's kind of normal and expected now that if your boss sends you an email or a group text or whatever your mode of communication is, that it's a sign of how invested and how much you like your job, whether or not you answer it at 9 o'clock at night. But what this is saying is if your boss is messaging you at 9 o'clock at night, you don't have to answer it and you can't be punished for not answering it. But if it's urgent, they can, right? So we work in the media. It's very different. It's hard to switch it off. So the Queen dies at...
She didn't do it during business hours.
She didn't do it during business hours.
Same with Matthew Perry.
The Queen dies in the middle of the night. Is it reasonable that the owner of a business or your superior in a media business gets online and says, hey, who's up? We've got to do the Queen or whatever. Yes, it is. I don't think that this would apply, that it wouldn't be reasonable. But should you have to answer your message from your boss who's just going at 10 o'clock at night because they've caught up on their emails and they're going, hey, you know that thing we talked about for that thing next week, you know, we should do blah, blah, blah. That's the message you're allowed to ignore, right?
I agree with you, Holly, completely. And I really like these laws. And it's probably worth noting that there are a lot of details that haven't been ironed out. And they're actually going to wait to see what happens and what discussions take place in workplaces to get all the regulations perfected.
Because the first thing you said, Holly, when we talked about this morning was, what's the definition of reasonable?
Yeah.
Because the employer and the employee might have very different definitions. This feels a little bit unhelpful. The Fair Work Commission is going to provide guidelines around this, but it's so far said it's not going to do so until people start complaining, and then they're going to use real-world examples to help form those guidelines. So it's a bit Wild West at the moment.
Because the issue that I foresee is that if you are someone who's earning over $175,000, it's not applied to you, this right to disconnect thing. It's often that person who's reaching out to the 22-year-old who is on a way less salary.
Yeah.
In that way, it takes someone very boundaried and someone with a bit of willpower to ignore it. My dream is that I could walk into my house and have a box that I could lock and my phone would go in there and I would ignore it until I put my baby to sleep. So 2 or 3 hours, that would be my dream.
You could do that.
I could. I don't know if I'd feel comfortable yet.
No offense, Jessie, but you're not saving lives.
I'm not a neurosurgeon.
Your role is no longer a news breaking covering role on the website.
Yeah.
It's unlikely there would be an out loud emergency that wouldn't need to be addressed in that moment.
Yeah, true.
Between the hours of 5 and 7 p.m.
But the problem is, and this is why laws like this are relevant, the place where we get our work communication is also the place where we get communication from our families, our friends, about our social life, where we do a million things. So it's not like you can say, okay, the work parts of my phone, I want to put in a locked box.
Yes. I was listening to a podcast over the weekend that said, we even know this with food, right? You know how you unpack your groceries and you put your dessert food and your sweet food in a different place you put your bread? Because you know that when you go to get your breakfast food, you only want to see what's for breakfast. And you've got your bread place and then you've got your milk place and blah, blah, blah. Like you sort. That's how the human brain works.
I see.
A phone doesn't allow you to sort. It's just bombarded.
It all comes at you at once.
But I want to play devil's advocate a bit because there was an article that came out in the Sydney Morning Herald by Paul O'Halloran. The headline was, lazy workers are licking their lips as the right to disconnect laws loom. And I hated that headline, but then he made some valid points. Let me explain. He's an employment lawyer, so he would know. And he said lazy workers exist in every workplace. Can we agree?
Of course.
Well, of course there are lots of lazy workers. And he had a bunch of quite funny examples. But he said the concern is that it will offer new protections to the workers who are already idle. And he actually said that laziness is becoming, in his line of work, an increasing trend in the case that he's taking on. So things like forging timesheets for fabricated hours, fake medical certificates, and watching Netflix while claiming to be working from home, sleeping on the job. Do we think that if you're a lazy worker, you're jumping up and down today? You're pretty excited?
Well, the thing is that it actually goes both ways. So in terms of what Fair Work can do, if you feel that your boss is making unreasonable requests, you can go to Fair Work and get them to adjudicate it. If you're a boss who you feel like your worker is not replying to reasonable requests, like say if I run a cafe and someone's called in sick and so I message everybody to say, can anyone work this shift? Again, this is not just about once, this is repeatedly. If you never respond, then I can say, well, I'm going to have to let you go or I'm going to go to Fair Work because you do need to reply sometimes. It's interesting to read some of the responses from Out Louders when we've asked about this in the past. And they say if you're, for example, a shift worker, if you're a nurse or something, or you work in casual work, your phone can be going 24/7 with, can anyone do this shift? Can anyone do this shift? Can anyone do this shift? Now, let's also give the benefit of the doubt to the person who needs to cover the shift, right? And so what I've learned, and I learned this lesson early on, I've said it on the show before, when you're working in an industry that's 24/7 and it's really hard, and when you're the owner of the business, obviously you never get to rest, but then there's also potentially upside for you that there aren't for people who work for you. But I once got told I can't keep Mia Freedman's hours anymore, and I can't be in the shower worried that she's messaged me. And I've never forgotten that. It was quite early in Mamamia. The work hours were crazy because the internet was crazy. So now I'm always very clear because I, as a manager and a boss, I can't get all my work done in my hours. So I will often be working on weekends and after work. Now I always make it very clear, you do not need to respond until it's work hours. If it's really important, I will text you. But what I don't want to be told I can't do is even send the emails.
Yeah.
Like if I give you permission to ignore them, if the fact that I've sent them is causing you stress and you can complain about it, that's tricky. Different if it's on your phone. Like if I was texting people all hours, that would be different. But I only do that to you too.
I think it's interesting because obviously I've managed teams too, and you do like the person who will respond to you out of hours. You do. If I'm the Queen's Dead who's around, first person who jumps on and goes, yep, no problem, then I'm like, good, nice, pat on head, like I do, you know. But the thing is that prejudice to responders to that kind of thing, I don't know if that means that you're back to the lazy thing. Is our definition of lazy that you're not constantly prioritizing work?
No.
Because I think like the example that you were giving about somebody who is not really doing their job, that's another issue. That doesn't really have anything to do with out of hours or not. Like they should be dealing with that anyway, not because of this. Whereas the thing is that I think we've got a culture now, and I certainly have internalized this culture, and it's, you know, for many years, is that if my phone beeps with work and I'm out for dinner with friends, if I'm putting the kids to bed, if I'm cooking dinner, work is more important. That's the message that the 24/7 culture gives, right? And this is trying to redress that a bit to give you permission to go. And I think that, you know, Gen Z are much better at this.
Yeah.
Boundaries. Is that
they ought to be, because Gen Z on average are also being paid less because they've had less experience.
But then you'd argue from the other side, you'd go, but don't you want to be the one who jumps on and get the advantage?
The argument about jumping on, and the Queen, for example, is that, and these laws cover this, is that you've got to be compensated. So if I jump on and do the Queen, which we do, and I then work 2 hours, I get 2 hours off on Monday. Yeah. And that should be the way that it works.
And also what they're trying to do is say, compensate people if you want them to work outside of hours. And the idea about the wage cap, as in that this doesn't apply to you if you earn really good money, is that that's what you're getting paid really good money for.
Exactly.
Right? So I think that that's all very reasonable. But I agree with you, Mia, that you shouldn't not be able to send messages.
I think what work means has just changed so much, because I think that everybody's expectations around work, there have been so many changes, as you said at the start, in what work looks like. I mean, now you can potentially work from home. A lot of people, some people can't. The idea of working part-time, the idea of working flexible hours, the idea of co-working, all of these things, and now the right to disconnect and boundaries, technology. Work has changed so much. You used to go to work at a certain time and then you would finish work at a certain time and that would be the end. You couldn't take work home with you, really.
The other element of this that the Out Louders told us, which I thought was something I hadn't considered, is that we're talking about availability creep and bosses and employees. Actually, what a lot of Out Louders are having issues with are clients, parents, if you're a real estate agent, then the people who are contacting you out of hours and expecting an immediate response isn't your boss, it's your client. Or teachers are getting calls, parents or students. There were Out Louders who said, hang on, my daughter is emailing her teacher at 8:30 p.m. That teacher should be offline.
That's true.
Which I think it's actually a symptom of an entire culture that now expects you to respond immediately.
What do we do? I mean, it used to be that working hours were widely understood to be 9 to 5, right?
Yeah.
Now that everybody, like, we like flexibility. Some people want to work part-time. Some people want to work different hours. Some people want to, you know, look after their kids in the day and work at night. So how do we manage that? Because let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt. How am I meant to know that you don't work on a Wednesday and Holly doesn't work on a Thursday afternoon and someone else works at night but not on every second Friday. I think that's what's difficult.
Yes, but this is an issue with our sense of immediacy about things that actually aren't urgent.
Yeah.
I realise that I start every email with sorry for my delay. Your email wasn't actually urgent and I'm responding 2 days later.
Yeah.
I think I need to delete that sentence and just go, I'll give you the response.
Yeah. Well, what Fair Work is saying too, it's about setting up the expectation between the employer and the employee, right? Is that, I mean, again, media business different, but anytime we've ever hired anybody, you sort of make it obvious that not to say you will be working around the clock, not that at all, but that sometimes things will happen and we will expect, X, Y, Z. And I think there's room in this legislation, it seems that way, for that kind of give and take and that kind of flexibility. But it is interesting because, we were saying before that it's not that the boss shouldn't send the email, but I guess this is giving permission to the person who's taken their work email notifications off their phone. You know what I mean? But the tricky part is that if you're in a team and you've taken your work email notifications off your phone and your colleague has not, that's tricky because, and I guess that's what this legislation's trying to sort of unpick, right, is that the person who has not doesn't get the advantage. It's hard.
Want unlimited out loud access? We drop episodes every Tuesday and Thursday exclusively for Mamamia subscribers. Follow the link in the show notes to get us in your ears 5 days a week. And a huge thank you to all our current subscribers.
The 3-word method is essentially distilling your style to 3 adjectives. So the 3-word method not only helps people identify their style, but also helps them cultivate it into something that is exciting and expressive and fun.
Apparently, all you need to transform your wardrobe is 3 words. In Sydney, at least, it feels like we're on the cusp of a new season. It's warming up, spring is around the corner, and I am yet again in a wardrobe crisis. Then I came across Alison Bornstein's, she's a stylist and a wardrobe consultant, big on TikTok. She has a 3-word method that is meant to change how you dress. And here's how it works. You choose 3 adjectives. For those who are already stuck, that's 3 describing words. 1 practical, 1 aspirational, and 1 emotional, to encapsulate the way you want to show up in the world. Now, to help, I actually went to her TikTok and I found out how she would describe Carrie Bradshaw's style. I thought this would help everyone. 3 words she had for Carrie were daring, elaborate, and mismatched. So that's how Carrie...
I think she's done it in the wrong order. Mismatched is practical because it's just a description, right?
I agree.
What's the second one?
Aspirational would be daring.
Yes.
And emotional, well, elaborate doesn't really work. Anyway, she broke her own rules and we're not going to break them. We're not going to break them.
No,
I've got
I'm
my 3. Do you want to hear them?
I want to hear Mia's 3.
My practical word is comfortable.
Yeah.
My aspirational word is cool, which
Yeah.
is so try hard.
You do try hard. to be
And
cool.
my emotional word is joy.
That's perfect for you.
What's really troubling me about those 3 words is that 2 out of the 3 were the same as my words.
What?
And that's my worst nightmare.
What's your practical word?
My practical word is obviously comfort, which is why I always have my camel toe leggings on. My aspirational, and this is what she says, is that words mean different things to different people.
That's true. What's your aspirational word?
Cool.
Oh, no.
Oh.
That's not right for you.
No.
Well, what do
It's
you
not right
mean
for
by
you.
cool? Do you mean temperature-wise?
No,
Do
that's
you mean
what
I don't
I
want to be
aspire
hot?
to. But you don't ever seem like you're trying to be cool. Like, I'm the biggest try-hard in the world. I'm always trying so hard. You're not
See, I don't mean cool
trying.
as in trendy.
You
I mean
like temperature
I
cool?
mean cool as in I want it to look like I haven't tried.
Yes,
Which I do
effortless.
Dishevelled.
Disheveled. Effortless. I think that's my thing.
I think yours is effortless, whereas I don't
Yeah,
want to look
I agree.
effortless.
No, you want to look like
No,
you
you wanna
tried
look like
hard.
you
And
tried
what's your
hard.
last word? What's your emotional
Then
word?
for emotional, I really
Hot.
thought about it and I went, I want to look self-assured.
Yes.
I want to look like I know who I am.
Oh, no.
When I wear my clothes, it's like, say what you like. It might not be on trend. It's certainly not feminine or sexy. But is that something that you'd look at and go, Jessie would wear that? Kinda. You know what I mean? I don't want to look.
Generic.
No, I do want to look generic.
does.
No, she does want to look
She
generic.
does want to look.
I want to look generic because
I was going to say
Yeah.
unassuming, but that's not an emotion.
no, like I don't want to be wearing the latest. I have no desire to be wearing the shoes everyone's wearing or to have the latest, like, I don't know, thing in Zara that's really,
and it's
that's
not
not
classic.
me.
Your word isn't classic. I mean, that would be a practical word, but it's not classic. It's, what did you say the word was?
Like plain, simple. Like just simple.
Basic.
Simplicity.
Basic,
but that's not an
simplicity.
emotion. Holly.
I think it's confident. I think that I just want to feel like myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emotional.
I don't want to feel like I'm dressing up as someone else.
Words
I get
are
that.
comfort, cool.
Yeah, which we've changed to effortless.
Effortless.
Yeah.
And confident.
Yeah.
I like that. That sounds good. Okay. My practical word is easy. Has to be easy. Like I get dressed
you don't
at
wanna
5
iron.
fucking o'clock in the morning. It has to be easy. Put it on, throw it on, done.
Yeah, because yours wouldn't be comfortable because you're always in heels, whereas
And
mine wouldn't be
jeans.
easy because I find that so sad.
Yeah, it has to be
For me.
easy. And my aspirational word is classy.
Yeah, that's why she wears
Mia?
jeans.
Yeah.
Am I allowed that one? I want to look classy.
She never looks slutty.
I'd like to look
I wish you could see my face out loud. I'm not dissing you in any way. I
Babe,
don't
it's
know
fine.
if that's.
You're my stylist.
I don't know if that's. It's interesting that that's what you're aspiring to.
That's what I'm aspiring to.
Do you mean classic?
I mean, like the kind of clothes that I look at and I go, I love that, is people who wear very maybe classic, but like an effortless, good word, like a silk shirt and a well-cut jean.
Okay.
And I
Classy.
like classy. Like
Sophisticated?
Well,
Not
Do you know what?
really.
I'm going to say modern classy. Because classy to me might feel a bit like
a pencil skirt.
Yeah, like fancy or rich. Like you're not that.
No,
like you
I'm
don't
not
want that
fancy.
look.
I don't want
You're
like
not fancy or
labels.
rich. What about elevated?
Elevated. I think that's it.
Elevated.
I
could
do.
be.
I always think I would like quiet luxury if I could afford it.
What's your?
Yeah.
My emotional word, I don't know. You have to help me with that. What's my emotional word? The things I like wearing the most, that I feel the most me in.
What's
Blue.
your emotional word?
Blue. Exactly.
Emotional.
I don't know.
Fun? Do you have fun?
I do.
No, I don't.
Not really.
Not really.
I do really like
Oh,
clothes,
here we go.
though.
I actually.
Have you got a list of words here?
Yes, I went to her thing
God.
because I couldn't think of any words. So playful.
No.
I'm just going to throw words
Are these
out.
emotional words or just words?
These are just all the words.
Okay.
Soft, romantic, sensual, not Holly. Demure, no. Floral, no.
Oh, no.
Hard, edgy, sexy, tough, minimal, sculptural, neutral, polished, graphic, elaborate. What are some? I need some emotion.
See, this is the thing about people who can speak fashion and people who can't, right? Is that most of us know, I'm not obviously a fashion person like Mia is, but there's like, when you look at a pair of jeans, you instinctively know I would wear those or I wouldn't wear those.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like, but it's hard to put the words around it.
I actually think that for you the word is classy, even though, you know, that idea of classy isn't really an emotion, but I think for you it is. It's like they say fat isn't a feeling, but every woman knows that it is.
Yes.
And so I think for you the emotional word is classy because you want to feel classy.
I'm going to look
I think
up
the
adject-
aspirational word
synonyms.
is classic for you, but modern classic.
Oh, modern classic.
And the practical word is easy.
Easy.
Jessie,
modern
where
classic,
did we get
classic.
stuck with you? We couldn't find your third word, which is your emotional word.
Yeah, I have self-assured.
Yeah, confident I think is good.
The days I feel the best are when I think I have something on. This sounds weird because I don't really care about clothes, but I like going to the office and being like, I know no one else is going to have this on. I feel really like myself in this.
Yeah. What about distinctive isn't right? Because you do. It's not like you want to look different to everybody else. You just want to look like yourself.
But I don't know who I am. Oh, this is so
This is the
deeply
problem.
existential.
It's getting hard.
Yeah.
Because confident would also probably be one of my aspirational words. It's like I want to look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you know, when you see yourself on a video and like you're sitting across from somebody who's really polished and stuff and you go, oh my God, I look like the world's oldest work experience kid.
Yeah. The days I feel the worst are when I come in and I feel messy. I feel crinkled. I feel like I threw this together at the last minute and it doesn't work. Yeah, it's just not consistent with who I want to be today. I don't feel like I look elevated enough.
What's interesting about your fashion is that, like I think I know it, and then you'll come in like you did last week wearing an amazing two-piece from Witchery that looks stunning. You never look bad. Like you had on like this brown skirt with a matching sort of cropped shirt and a
really
belt.
nice.
And it was unlike anything I'd ever seen before, and it was unlike anything I'd ever think of you wearing, but you seemed kind of comfortable in it and confident.
And I suppose this is what she says, that these words are ever changing. And I'm finding that in this period of my life, it's very different. Like definitely in my early 20s, feminine or something would have come out, right? There would have been something where I felt more sculpted or I had to have a particular neckline or whatever. I feel very different.
I know what the word is for you, possibly emotionally, independent. Because you're not trendy.
Yes.
You don't want to be trendy.
No.
You just want to look like yourself. And how you feel on any day might change. It might be one day leggings and another day it might be this two-piece with a belt. But that's you. Holly and I are much more – I mean, I'm obviously the biggest trend slut.
Yeah.
Holly likes a version of a trend, but she's always very late to it. And you are willfully – it's not like I'm going to wear something really crazy.
Yeah.
You're just independent. You won't be told. And if I ever – because I'm like, I think Jessie should wear this. And when I've ever tried to like give you clothes or whatever, you won't have a bar of it because it's someone else's idea of you.
Yeah.
Do you think that your words have changed over time?
No.
Really?
Oh, like in my magazine days, I don't think I would have said
Remember when you were
comfort.
trying to dress like a boss like a little while ago?
Oh, God. I had a very weird thing that happened for about a year. It's Ashley Ketty's fault. I started dressing like her character, Evelyn, on Strife, in suits.
You know what it was?
But
You were
I
trying to
don't
dress like someone who took themselves seriously for a minute. And then you were like, wait, I don't take myself
I wanted
seriously.
to do a cool version of me, but it just wasn't me.
But also that was
Made me
true
sad.
to your – I think your words are spot on, and it's not a surprise that you're the person who's most clothes focused about that, because those things were bringing you joy at the time, but then they stopped. And when things stopped giving you joy, you cut them dead, which I very much respect. Whereas I'll be like, oh, I used to like wearing that thing. I better still wear it.
My practical word apart from comfort would probably be Wet-X or sponge because I'm just so suggestible.
Yeah, you
I'm
are.
so suggestible. Like I'll see Asher wearing something and I'll go, oh, I'm going to dress like Asher. And then I'll see Copenhagen Fashion Week and I'm like, oh, I'm going to dress like those Scandi girls. I'm very porous.
So what's the useful part of this conversation? You're supposed to find your 3 words and then it's supposed to help you, decide what you're going to buy?
So a bit of advice, which I quite liked. The first was that she said, if you're having trouble with your words, have a chat to some friends or some family or your partner, which made me laugh because Luca would be like, I don't want to talk about this. And she said, don't get offended, which I felt like was for me because I would say, how do I dress? And me would be like, ugly, stupid, bad. And I'd be like, they're not the words I'm looking for today. So you're meant to do that. And then you're meant to write what that word means to you because our definitions are different. As Mia and I said, cool. They mean different things to us, so we've got to really flesh it out. And the third thing is if you've got Pinterest or something, they say make a board. You'll see consistent things come through. Like I'm not big on colour. Like I quite like a monochromatic blacks and whites and bright things just don't work for me. And so she said to do that and that will help you with your wardrobe and like going out and deciding.
Another way to get those first 2 words, the practical word is pull out all the things that you wear the most
Your
in your
staples,
wardrobe,
yeah.
the 10% of your wardrobe that you wear 90% of the time, and look at what it all has in common. Maybe that word is black, maybe that word is jeans, maybe that word is comfort, maybe that word is sexy. You got to find what the things that you wear all the time have in common. The aspirational word is who do you want to dress like? Like who would you love to be? Who do you like follow on Pinterest and whatever? And then for the emotion is thinking about when you're wearing something, and we all know that feeling where you just go, I feel right.
I feel like myself today. Do you have a style icon? Like one person? You've always said Carrie Bradshaw, but like is there anyone else like a real person who you look to?
It's the suggestible thing because I'm always looking for different people. So I'll like Carrie's Bradshaw style for a while. I reminded myself of her style when I started going too far down the suit route.
Yeah.
And I got a bit sad. And then I was like, oh, I remember wearing prints and mismatched things actually gives me a lot of joy. So the suits weren't giving me joy. I've sort of moved back. But now there's no particular designer. There's no particular celebrity that I'm always like, I want to dress like
How about you,
her.
Holly?
My complete style crush, and the only reason why I watched this terrible show is Sylvie in Emily in Paris. Have you ever seen?
No.
Have you ever watched it?
No, I haven't.
She's
But I
great.
can't dress like her because she's like a teeny little stick person. But like she is the older person in Emily in
She's
Paris.
a midlife French woman.
She's the midlife French woman, and she's very sexy. Very sexy.
So sexy.
But lots of like silk shirts and lots of very, like, I love and admire people who can wear very simple things and make them look amazing.
French women would be
love
your
that
French
shit.
women,
Yeah.
actually.
Like slightly undone, like hair, which is easy for me.
Maybe your feeling is French.
No, your
Oh.
aspirational word is French.
It's French. There you go.
Yeah.
And
I
then,
wish I was that, but I'm not. But like vibes of that. I remember when the last season was on, I became obsessed with this gold silk shirt she wore, and I was messaging our fashion editor all the time going, and she's like, babe, it's Gucci. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen.
Well, she can't buy Gucci, but we should buy Holly a beret.
Oh, yeah, and a baguette.
Outlouders. We did a subscriber episode about whether or not it's appropriate to buy your friend a sex toy. And look, it got very personal because, spoiler, that dilemma was written in by Mia. And yeah, it was me that thought it was inappropriate. There were a bunch of responses by the Outlouders. Some said, best gift ever. Those things are bloody expensive. Others said, it's a hard no from me. And another said, as long as it isn't pre-loved, which I feel like Mia is.
Imagine if I'm giving people used vibrators.
I wouldn't put it. It's not beyond you.
There was another dilemma in that episode too, so go and listen. The link is in our show notes for you to follow it. A big thank you to all of you Outlouders for listening to us on today's show. Please send us your 3 words about your fashion, and actually send us the 3 words you think that we should have, because we're
Yes.
probably delusional. And we will be back in your ears tomorrow. Thank you to our fabulous team for helping us put this show together.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Shout out to any Mamamia subscribers listening. If you love the show and want to support us as well, subscribing to Mamamia is the very best way to do so. There is a link in the episode description.